So, welcome everyone to this edition of Sense of Identity. As those of you who've been along and watched one of our podcasts before, this isn't really about us. It's about people doing interesting stuff around the industry and topics that we think would be of interest to our readers and users and what have you. So, this week is no different in as far as we've got, I think, a topic that's going to be very, very interesting to quite a lot of our users. So firstly, just welcoming Paul Miles and Colin Sloss from Silverback Consultancy. Welcome, guys.
Good
Thanks,
to see you, Paul. Thanks for inviting us.
That's all. Very welcome. So if I may, I'm going to do a little bit of scene setting, and I'm always accused of talking too much, so trust me, I'm not going to this time. But the reason we were really keen for you guys to come on and perhaps chat about a bit about what you're up to is we're very much all connected with the financial services industry. We've got a big user base in the intermediary sector, which is really important to us, and it always strikes me that intermediaries are there to help consumers plan their futures, make sure they're doing the right things in those different stages of our lives. And yet, often when they're thinking about their own businesses, I wonder to what extent they're considering their own future with that business and ultimately its exit or evolution or becoming part of somebody else, whatever that might be. It struck me that given that is such an important topic for the intermediary world, it's really where your expertise lies, I think, isn't it? So if I may, having done a very poor introduction to how you help IFAs, perhaps in your words, Paul, can you just give us a brief description of what it is you're up to?
Thanks, Paul. I'm not sure it's interesting, as you keep saying, but I'll make it as interesting as I possibly can. I work as a consultant in the industry, as you say, and the area in which I work with is to help businesses grow. That's more, over recent years, it's become more about getting businesses exit ready. The thing that I do, and perhaps we can talk about a bit later on, is I hold firms accountable to achieve that. And it's amazing, actually, the difference that you can make by holding people accountable, making it happen. And technology often plays a really big part of that, which is really why Colin and I work so closely together. So perhaps, Colin, you would want to just do a quick introduction?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I joined Paul on 1st of July last year, and we've known each other for over 30 years, and we've kept in touch as our careers have developed. What attracted me to Silverback was the fact that I could support Paul in the fintech arena. And I think, having been in fintech again for over 30 years, there's never been a more exciting time to be in fintech. I'll get the AI on the table early doors. I think the market is evolving very quickly. You've got legacy providers, and I've spent many years at some of the leading tech firms in that time. And I guess you can call these, they do go into that legacy bracket. And you've now got a bunch of new disruptors who are moving very fast, developing very fast, and the AI is bringing huge efficiencies to the market. Not all of them are going to survive, but I think there are some exciting trends in meeting transcription, in cyber tech security. I mean, obviously, yourself and Adam, Paul, are involved in beyond encryption, so you're contributing to that. And we're seeing an evolution of tech where benefits are quantifiable. So you can very easily look at return on investment for the investment you're making in that software license. So in that regard, Paul and I are working with a number of fintechs to drive efficiencies into businesses and come up with what we would consider to be the best model office for that business.
Paul, if I can just jump in there, I think over the years, I don't think financial advisor businesses have been frightened of technology, because actually they've taken on board a lot of technology. And over the 25 years, perhaps, that they've been doing so, or even longer, that's become a bit of a mess, actually. And there's lots of people say that they might be talking to each other in some cases, but not absolutely as it should be. And I just feel like, following on to Colin's point about the evolution of all this, it just feels like the time that people and businesses are thinking about, well, I'm not going to kick it down the road anymore. You know, my business does run okay, which has always been the sort of stopping point, hasn't it? And said, well, I'll come to that in 3 years' time. Actually, now I'm thinking, well, I don't want to get left behind. 4 of us got together now and set up a financial advisor business. You know, the big question always is, what technology would we put in it? You know, we wouldn't put, would we, 30-year-old technology in the center of our business. Why would we do that right now? But it's moving so fast. So that's really quite exciting, I think. I think, you know, a lot of firms are now saying, actually, perhaps I do review all this. And that's part of, you know, what I do in terms of helping them grow. Well, where are you going to the business? Rather, don't let the technology lead you. Just say, well, where do we want to be, and how can that technology help? And it may be you got to kick a lot of technology into touch. We know it's going to be difficult, but you're going to have to bite the bullet at some stage. Let's plan for it. We're not going to do it, but tomorrow morning. But let's plan for it over the next few years and get it exciting, get something happen.
I think that's really interesting. And I think that is quite a change, considering more around tech of where you want to go, what sort of business do you want to have, and what sort of service proposition you want to offer to your customers. I guess certainly in the past, my own experience has been fairly high apathy towards new tech solutions and that sort of thing. And I think that having that switch to this is a fundamental part of my business and it's going to impact my service proposition, my customer's experience, and ultimately the valuation on my business is a real positive change. I'll tell you the other thing I was going to say, and joking aside, and I know you were playing the humble bit there, Paul, by saying, look, is it exciting? But it should be exciting, shouldn't it? Because, at the end of the day, when I'd start to drop a little Venn diagram after we chatted in a previous chat about, what are all the components that make up a good business? Not just an intermediary, by the way, but intermediaries have got a triple whammy of problems to overcome, because not only are they having to deal with ever-changing landscape of legislation, they're dealing with relationships, not just relationships with their customers, but with the team that is therefore representing them, is the face of their business, and the processes that support that team, the tech that supports the processes, the commerciality of all that, how that blends together. At the end of the day, all of those things for every business, and I would suggest for an intermediary, it's a really acute example, ripples down to what services you provide and what the value of those services are and how that ripples through to your bottom line. And when we talked, Colin, we've all known each other a long time around tech and the tech aspect of that. Of course, that's of interest to us, and we're a very thin slice, by the way, of all those things. But nonetheless, how you interact with your customers and how they expect you to lay up your services, unless you start that journey, and that was going to be my question. Where do you start that glide path? Because that's a lot of topics, and you need someone that can out coordinate all of those and their interrelationship. What for you is a, and you can't say what's typical. Every business is different. And that's why you guys exist. But what is a glide path, a typical glide path for someone to go, look, we need to ratify, start with a clean piece of paper, map our business, understand what we're doing right and wrong. What would be a typical interaction for you guys?
Okay, well, I think there's two major things happening right now, and they're both regulation driven. And the first one's Consumer Duty, which has been around for coming up for 2 years now, and is a framework for businesses to operate to. There's not hard and fast rules and regs. This is more of a culture and standards that you've got to adhere to give the client fair value. And that, so you're then looking at what is my cost to serve. Banks have talked about cost to serve for many years. And interestingly, banks are now making inroads again into wealth management distribution. And that's driven opportunistically for one, and secondly, because of the so-called advice gap. It isn't a so-called advice gap. It is an advice gap because the general public, there's something like 9 million who would value the services of an independent financial advisor or a restricted advisor for that matter, but can't justify the cost of it. So we're back to cost to serve. And I was with a business the other week who a very upmarket business, part of an accountancy practice, and their advisors will turn over good levels of recurring revenue. But for every advisor, there's 0.9 FTE, full-time equivalent, in terms of support.
Right.
And to actually justify going into other markets and servicing more clients, they need to take that cost down significantly. And this particular business wants to get it down from 0.9 to 0.6 over the next couple of years. And they're approaching it from a tech perspective. Because if you're using things like most of the AI providers will operate meeting transcription tools, the old days of, I can remember when you had a dictaphone, you then present that to your PA who would type it up, play it back to you, you'd refine it a bit more. I mean, we thought that was efficient at the time, but you compare that now to an AI transcription tool, taking the meeting notes, you've then got cleansing tools afterwards to get it to 95% accuracy. one AI provider said to me just last week. So you're taking hours and hours out of that process, which you can then devote to spending more time with and finding additional clients and servicing additional clients. So I think it's quite possible for those businesses where the advisor is turning over six figures, north of 100,000, 200,000 a year in terms of recurring revenue. It's not insurmountable to think that could easily be 200,000 to 300,000 by the efficiencies that these tools bring.
And it feels like everyone should be equally motivated, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, if you want to be effective with your customers and offer a good level of service, then you've got to show how you make a material impact to that as an advisor. And that's the same things that someone coming in to buy your business is going to want to understand, aren't they? Can you demonstrate how you conduct your business effectively and economically? Because that has a material impact, I'm assuming, like any other business, on ultimately what you're going to yield from your own business. I think so. Well, you gave us some unbelievable examples of the differences in valuation. I'm not asking you to mention names because I think that would be inappropriate, but the scale of difference and in terms of expectations, there's a little ditty you use I think would be interesting to just where people's whistles there, really.
Of course, Paul. I think there's just to finish off on that last point, though, there's a little bit of conflict, isn't there, in a way, because the price, the cost per client, right? If it's quite low, a consolidator in the marketplace at the moment will see that as an opportunity because they'll be able to increase the client's costs, and then they believe that they can actually offer a better service to it. And I'm not sure in all cases that's what's happened. And, it is all about the consumer, isn't it? So yes, in terms of the businesses that I've been working with, the example that you want me to give is Company A, which is not a typical company entirely in the UK, but certainly a large percentage are like this, that they believe that they're independent. They have a number of platforms. They have a number of perhaps investment managers that they work with. They're not really looking at the efficiency of the business. The multiple of advisors to support staff will be 4-to-1. Profitability is going to be low on that. And there's a lot of businesses that like that. And the point was that Company B were in that place. And they said, Paul, we do want to move. How do we move? How do we change? And the thing for me was just to simplify the business. And you know what it's like. It's like, for me anyway, certainly the more simple it is, the better it is. But it often applies to all parts of businesses. And a lot of people aren't able to stand back because they're running their business and they're doing stuff. Whereas if they've got somebody that's alongside them working to help them, they can change that business. And in this particular case, we changed it down to just one platform. We had our own centralized investment proposition. Our staff to advisors was 2-to-1, not 4-to-1. Okay. So I talk about 5 times multiples now. So Company A got 1, Company B got 5 times as much. And we're talking tens of millions here. Extraordinary the difference that made.
That's a pretty good investment. I mean, that's the point. From a point of view of if you're going to do something, do it well. Because like you say, the truth is this should all be about consumers. I mean, that's, the whole ethos of advice should be about consumers at the center of it. But that's why I was saying that I think doing the right things by your business are the very same virtues that increase your business value are the ones that will serve your customers better. And that's for me the sort of slight not there's no dichotomy in it, is there? It's just it doesn't make sense not to do it.
And in those two cases, they both wanted to give great client outcomes and great client service, but the business A weren't able to do that. They were doing it as far as they could do. They weren't doing anything wrong. Company B's, service was just amazing for clients because they were able to do that. They reduced substantially the number of clients they looked after. That was a process we went through. So client segmentation. We didn't sell the clients. We actually gave them to other IFAs. We actually introduced them personally and made that process as simple as possible and as good and feel good for the client that we actually cared about that. And we reduced the number of households we were looking after. Both businesses had the same AUM, but much, much reduced households to look after, and was able to offer that service that they were really passionate about. And therefore, client outcomes are fantastic. But at the end of the day, they got a great valuation. Trying to do is say, look, we're not trying to sell your business. What we're trying to do is help it get exit ready. So it gives you the choice to be able to do it and to maximize the valuation that you've been working 10, 20 years for. Why wouldn't you do that? And it becomes a much better place to work for employees and your staff. It becomes more profitable. Clients get a better service. It's just like, why wouldn't you do it? And actually what happened in one case was actually, I don't want to exit now. I'm enjoying this much more than I was enjoying it 3 years earlier. So he gave you the choice, do I sell it or not? Well, no, I don't want to now. It's running really well. I've got the right team around me. I can trust everybody and it's fun.
Well, and there's that. So again, when we were chatting before, it feels like, obviously, Colin, with your background on the tech side, I mean, you've been involved in a lot of different, providers and capabilities there. So is that where your, the best of breed, brains meet in terms of the different facets of what you both do, if you like, because I can see how, selfishly, the tech piece has always been, really of interest to me. I know Colin, Adam and I, we've all been very much in that space. I know you have as well, Paul, but this isn't just about that, is it? It's do you actually operate, do you shadow the operations of these businesses for a period to gain an understanding of what they're doing and then introduce those two different skill sets? How does that operate in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I think, as first seek to understand. So I think it's important that you get to know the businesses, you get to know the personalities, and you look at where the pain is. So, you can earth pain. Paul's been in businesses and they're saying, well, they've got too many clients at the lower end. So how do we manage those out efficiently to other firms? If you look at the larger end of the market, the one I referred to was looking to have less people to service the advisor, and they were using tech as the conduit to do that. And that then gives you the opportunity to take on more clients if you wish, or change the bar. And as Paul said, maybe deal with some high net worth clients and extend your profitability that way. So it's your classic, business modeling. Paul uses various operating systems to play that out. Perhaps it'd be interesting to talk about some of the services you've offered, Paul, in that regard.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. And I think what we're relating to here, Paul, is we're not saying that I run the operations team. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, how does the business operate in all areas? And say, like for people, for example, that'd be one of the first elements that we will look at. It might be a difficult bit, but you remember a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins, and he talked about the right people in the right seats. Unless you've got that, you're not going to have a great business. So let's have a look at the people you've got in the business. Let's have a look at the seats that they're in. So how do we measure the people, and so on and so forth? And that's just one element of it. But I will help them. I will facilitate that sort of conversation with their team members, but they will go away and do it. So I'm facilitating the implementation of a better way to run your business. That's what I'm doing. And I'm holding the leadership team accountable every 90 days. So you've agreed to do this, because otherwise we're not going to hit our 1-year plan. So you've agreed to do that. Have you done it? And it's not a blame. It's just about making sure that we keep on track the whole time. If those things, to you obviously weren't important because you didn't get it completed, or you didn't have the time to complete it, is it still important to us? Who's going to do it in the next quarter? Because we need to do it to get to our main plan. Now, within all this, in terms of the technology bit, again, I have the same sort of conversations. It's like, how are you operating your business? You tell me how it all works. And then, where are the blocking points, as Colin mentioned? And then how can we help that? So that's then a conversation with Colin in terms of breaking all that down. How do we simplify what they've got? How do we change it? Because it's going to need to change with the least amount of pain. And how long is that going to take? And that's all in that business model, Paul, in terms of, it's just a key part of what they've got to do.
Yeah, I have a suspicion, just a clean look at a business quite often from an outside expert eye in itself, I would imagine, surfaces quite a lot of issues. The other, coming back to something else you mentioned a minute ago, because it's something Adam and I chat about historically, was that consolidator world. It seems to be, it's peaky and troughy, but there seems to be there's a lot of activity out there at the moment, as far as I can gather. But one would assume, as you say, that consolidators themselves are analysing the businesses in very much the same way as you are, critiquing them as to their real value. So, that example you gave around the difference between the ratcheted value for one that was operating optimally and the one that wasn't, you know, that I'm assuming, as you say, that's bread and butter for a consolidator, is it, when they're looking around the market?
I think it's bread and butter in terms of how they talk, how they speak, and what's been happening. But the real thing is it's not been going on. I think the consolidator market, and quite rightly, you know, the regulators had a little look what's going on over there now. And I think it's got better. I've seen it, you know, the last 6 months, perhaps on the due diligence process. I'm not criticizing anybody, but I think it's more deeper due diligence before the purchase of the business. And a big part of that will be consumer duty, because, you know, what's been happening with clients, you know, we want to make sure that the client outcomes have been great over there, and we want to bring them into our business. And then you think, well, you know, when you buy that business, you know, that's part of the values of the business, isn't it? The client outcomes is part of that. You know, you want that to be as good as possible. So, and then the technology side of it is that, you know, even if they've got the same badge technology, it won't be the same version of it. And there will be conflicts when they're getting that together. So I think, you know, the consolidator market is an interesting place. I mean, it's not going anywhere. There's plenty of PE money to support it. I just think it will change. Eventually it will get better. And what I mean by that is that, you know, if you're buying a business, you want to integrate that business, don't you? If you're consolidating. And there's a lot of these consolidators have been buying too many businesses, haven't got the right implementation team, and these businesses are just running as they were before.
Yeah.
The business has been purchased is not a bad thing necessarily, because, you know, they've got their lump sum and they're running the business as they were, and then they've got options. So, yeah, I mean, it's a journey, I think, Paul, with the consolidators. And I think, you know, there will be amalgamations. There will be more PE coming in. There will be larger PE money. You know, we saw that last week with Amber River, you know, which is great for them. Good luck to them. It's an amazing number they got. There is money around, definitely, for firms. But, you know, where I'm working is I'm trying to help businesses get to a situation where they can maximise the value. And that might be with a consolidator. It might be with a national business. You know, it might be just give them options. They're going to get the maximum value. Their client outcomes, better for their team members. And then just see what the market offers you at that stage.
Yeah. Do you think everything we've sort of talked about feels like a lot of the consolidators and the IFAs that are potentially exiting have sort of understandably commercially been focused on the forgive my callousness, the richer pickings of higher net worth, or where do you think that leaves the market from a mass market access to advice or guidance perspectives? I fear that there's, you know, looking at perhaps, and I know that's not necessarily the topic here we're focused on. It's about exit value for those intermediaries. But just for a second, flipping that to the consumers, I do fear that there's a sort of that gap is the chasm is going to broaden as more of that rationalization goes on.
Well, the thing, Paul, isn't that the key to the valuations of the businesses that are being bought is to move the funds into some sort of consolidator service at possibly a higher price.
Yeah.
But there are firms where, you know, good firms out there now where under consumer duty, they will review the client against perhaps the internal price investment proposition. But if it's not better, then the clients won't be moved. So they will remain on the old charging prices. Then you've got other consolidators that are still there, you know, trying to take businesses and charge more for the clients. And how can that be right? What do you think?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you've been speaking to a few firms recently that got that sort of model, haven't you?
Yeah, I think that's, the fair value requirement comes into play there. And I think, as Paul said, that the model's refining for the consolidators, because early days people are saying, well, what's the most I can get for my business? And then, of course, the private equity wants return on investment. So generally there'll be an earnout to be had, which would be over maybe a 2 to 3 year period. And I've seen some really tough experiences of that, where to hit the numbers, and these are often quite aggressive numbers, the directors of the firm are putting in 70-hour weeks with a view to hitting that and getting stress and the rest of it as a result of that. You have got a bit of a challenge. You know, you want to systemize the process. So you want to give the most efficient process to the firm that you've acquired. But at the same time, you don't want to disrupt them by changing tech potentially or introducing new tech, because you've got that adoption curve. So suddenly production drops for 3 to 6 months while you're going through the pain of that change. So there's a number of moving parts in this. And, you know, I would say this, wouldn't I? But I like Paul's approach in that he's getting to know the businesses. And before we rush into some sort of exit plan, we're actually getting them that exit ready is a phrase that you'll hear a lot these days from consolidators, but it's preparing him for that, for that future state. And that could be, I mean, one of the businesses I worked with as the consolidator had a criteria where your business value was dependent on a number of criteria, which included things like you had to move on to the preferred technology stack of the consolidator. Now, that might take a year or two to do. They want you to look at what assets, client assets, you could transfer onto their platform. And based on that, you'd have a multiple of value by fulfilling that criteria. Now, that might take 2 or 3 years to do, but you're maximizing that exit value. And the other thing, what they say, creative thought is the enemy of efficiency. So you want to have a systemized process. And I think that's where Paul and Silverback have come in and imparted, Paul's wisdom. Paul sold his own business 15, 20 years ago. So learned a lot of lessons from that and then can apply it and point out the banana skins to these firms, which are often wide-eyed thinking, how much I'm going to get, how much multiple I'm going to get for my business.
In my experience is trying to be honest up front about, what is it going to be like post-sale? And, you hear a lot talking about culture. My culture's great, my culture's this, but it's probably not the same, the two. They've probably got good cultures, but they're not the same. And, to the seller, they've got to know that things are going to change. It's not going to be the same. So what is going to change? I try to help prepare them for as much as possible because it is going to change. And the closer you can match those two businesses up, the better. But be honest up front. Both parties, please be honest up front, and we'll have a better consolidation.
Do you guys work with the consolidators or just with the firms that are to be consolidated?
Well, in my case, there are two consolidators actually three consolidators that I work with. And, one of them is saying to me, we want to buy, sometimes it's, well, I want to buy that business, but it's not in the right shape for me to buy yet. Can you go meet them, speak to them? Can we change it? And again, there's no rush for this. It's not an overnight project. You can't just change your business. You can't just change your tech overnight. So if we can have a plan to do it, that helps, doesn't it? Rather than just having this can, which we're kicking down the road. And then we can get it ready, and the business will be then interested in it. And I think the closer I'm getting to some of the businesses, the more that helps me prepare the business for the exit. Do you know what I mean? Because I know now more about really what they're looking for. What's worked, what's the best type of integration. What does the business need to look like to do that? And so definitely.
And I guess from your side, Colin, more on looking at it from a tech perspective, is there almost a tech blueprint to follow a target operating model that the consolidator might have to say, okay, as you mentioned, might be that we want to move assets onto a platform, but will that also go so far as CRM and ancillary systems as well?
Yeah, I think the two main issues for a consolidator are, first of all, data quality. How clean is the data of the business you're buying? Can you trust the numbers that you're getting? And as an adjunct to that, the second challenge is MI. How are you going to get your MI reporting from these businesses? So we can certainly help with some data analysis of what they've got. We can look at things like data cleansing. And then the way the market's evolving is that people are moving to more of a generic MI tool. And, I'm sure you use some of them yourself. But your Snowflakes, your Power BIs, and they'll have a data warehouse to do that. So those are two big challenges. As far as, CRM is a given. They definitely need a CRM. Is there a blueprint? Not just yet. I think there's some really good stuff coming into the market. You've got some clients who say, I love that meeting transcription. It saved me so much time. So they're getting quite effusive about, the strengths of these tools. And so that will be a sort of target operating model is a phrase often used, but there will be a position where you'll say this is the best tech that I want. And the other thing which Paul and I've seen come into the market more recently is what's known as reg tech or GRC, where you're using tools which include AI to do things like file checking. So you think about the manual process, and you think about some of the support services out there who've got lots of people doing manual file checks. They might do a random sample of 1 in 10, 1 in 5, 1 in 3, depending on how qualified the advisor was. You can now systemize that, and you can have AI doing it in the background, a fraction of the cost.
Mhm.
So there's some real game changers coming into the market, and we're just doing our best to keep abreast of that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it does feel like, say, the advisory market. If there's a way of addressing, some of these the challenges through tech. I mean, I think we've all grown up in a world where a lot of these direct books are living on a legacy of a full fat charging model, aren't they? So they're all on ring donut diets. There's a thinner approach which employs tech in there that sort of helps move things forward. And it sounds to me like you're helping people sort of consider not just the business as usual processes, people, all that stuff that is absolutely critical, but the tech and how it blends with that as well. So yeah, and it feels like a recipe for success. And I hope people take a leaf out of other people's books to get you guys to help them on the journey.
Well,
Thanks,
the
Paul.
other dynamic, Paul, which is often talked about, is intergenerational wealth, which is a bit of a mouthful, but basically the inherited wealth that the Gen Z are going to inherit. And do they want to deal with that manual process, sort of paper process that the traditional firm would offer? No, they absolutely want a tech approach. They want to be talking about crypto and tech funds and all the rest of it, and they want that digital experience, and they also want everything now. They want to have that instant gratification that they get from AI and from the web traffic they're doing. So I think that's the other reason that technology is playing such a big part with client portals and things, and getting the younger generation more engaged in the process.
Listen, there's so much we could carry on talking about here. As I say, I hope those that are sort of contemplating their futures, from the intermediaries that we touch, will sort of take a leaf out of your book. I'm very grateful for your time to participate. One last little question, which we always ask our guests, and I should have probably forewarned you on this, and I didn't, was if you were to meet your younger self a couple of years ago, obviously, what piece of advice would you give your younger self to help them on their journey? Paul, you start.
Thanks for the notice, Paul. I think the thing I would say to people, and I do mentor some individuals, and that ranges in ages actually. So that's quite interesting in itself, isn't it? So the youngest person that I mentor started his own financial advisor business about 18 months ago. And whilst he'd been in the industry, to take that leap to actually be an entrepreneur and running his own business was huge. But I'd like to think that I've been a good sounding board for him. And that's, sharing my experiences has been important to him and to others. So if I was 20 years younger, 30 years younger, I would have looked for somebody to have worked with me, alongside me, mentored me, been a board advisor, some trusted person that I could speak to about how I run my business and what mistakes, must.
That's try not to make them again.
My own financial advisor business for 20 years. And believe you me, I made a lot of mistakes. And so if I can stop them from making the same mistakes, and I think that's what I'd look to.
That's a good one. Colin?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I would definitely embrace that mentorship. Take a mentor and expose yourself to as much of the industry as you can. Read as many books as you can, because that's the beauty of the world we live in now. There's so much help you can get, self-help you can get through podcasts like these, or AI is just mind-blowing. It's like, again, you think, what was the most recent example? I'm doing a PowerPoint, and in the old days, I'd spend, a day putting my 30 slides together, whatever it was, another day practicing it. So I knew the routine for it. And then maybe they're going to marketing, and marketing would put a different background on it, and imaging and such. Now you can go into the generative AI tools, and you know all the names of them. You can give it a sort of synopsis of what you want, and your 30 slides are there better than you could ever design them yourself, within a matter of minutes. So I think that's the exciting for me, is embrace as much as you can of this fast moving world that we now live in.
Brilliant. Listen, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Paul Miles, Colin Sloss.
Guys.
Look forward to staying in contact with what you get up to.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.